chill bros, because I want to get this out of the way, all right? Because I keep hearing things and stuff and people talking about this January team update, okay? Which has revealed some crazy ass shit. There's crazy stuff going on, all right? We thought we were going to be getting tier 1 content. Well, turns out the prophecy was true. Many people thought that we're going to be getting all this different, well, not that we're going to be getting different stuff, but that we're just going to be getting tier 1. But we did see in the trailers that they were showing Papunica, and they were talking about it, and they were talking about Yorn. There were many conspiracy theories whether or not we're actually possibly going to be getting tier 3 at launch. And it turns out we are. There's Yorn, there's Phaeton, there's Punica now, and there's tier 3 content. And this has sparked a lot of controversy in the community. Is tier 3 content good? Is tier 3 content bad? We were supposed to do tier 1 for months. But now we're not doing that. We're going to be rushing. And so many people see this as a really good thing. But I personally think that there are problems with this. Now, do not get me wrong, okay? Lost Ark will remain a tremendous game. I think it's possibly in the short term the best decision that they could have done by introducing as much content as possible. And also they've stated in this, although very vaguely, and we still don't know a lot of things, that there are going to be balance tweaks for pacing of the game. So they did take the feedback from the beta where people got to the end game of tier 1 really quickly. Granted, they had a lot of materials for free that they could have purchased, but they're going to be tweaking that. And also they've said that they're increasing like HP of Guardians and all this sort of stuff, right? So what tier 3 content are they introducing specifically? So this is the important part, and this is where I think my opinion differs from a lot of other people's, and why I think that in the short term, again, we're gonna have a banging time, okay? I love tier 2 content. I love tier 1 content. I think it's gonna be a lot of fun, but I personally did have a lot of problems with the way that they were approaching the tier 1 stuff, all right? Let's take a look at this. Tier 3 gear will be available at launch, as well as a few core tier 3 dungeons support proper progression, including Oreha's Well, Abyssal Dungeon, Chaos Dungeon Stage 3, and Belganos Guardian Raid. Combat level cap has been increased to 60. Additionally, T3 content will be added to the game post-launch in order to set the pace for player progression, both in terms of new content and optimal difficulty. This is scary to me, okay? So this is going to be a little bit all over the place, but let's work through it. Why do I think that in the short term, having all this content that we're going to be getting through possibly for weeks, maybe for some people months, because if they're extending how long it's going to take through tier 1 and tier 2, and on top of it, we're not going to have any catch-up mechanics. As some people have been pointing out, there have been some leaks when it comes to that, although it's not 100% guaranteed. It could be the way that it is on Russia, where you're going to be essentially in tier 1 and tier 2 for 1 or 2 days. But I don't think so. I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of that. I think the point of this is to have this very big progression that in the short term is really cool, because you're kind of going to be rushing because everybody wants to be in tier 3, which is going to mean that there's going to be a lot of difficult content. But there are problems with it, and I have written down some things. So the main feedback that I've seen has been, can't believe people are so upset about more content. And why I disagree with this statement specifically is because there isn't realistically more content. And let me elaborate on that. We have some other things here too, like why do we play the game? How this change affects casuals, average, and no-life players? Why is T3 content better than anything else in the game? And this kind of ties into that question, right? Why are people so upset? But why is tier 3 content better? I don't consider what they are adding tier 3 content, and it boils down to who are they making the game for. Now, this is tier 3 content, and more content cannot be bad. But in my eyes, it is, because this isn't the real content of tier 3. This isn't why people are excited for tier 3 content. It's not Argos. It's not Legion raids. You know, it's not Valten. It's not Mystic. It's none of those things. It's literally doing Chaos Dungeon and doing 4 Guardian raids, doing Belganos. And I don't really consider that content. If you like doing dailies, if you like gathering gold, if you enjoy the progression towards some ephemeral gold that's somewhere at some point going to be introduced in the game, absolutely, that's great. But I think that tier 3 content and this push towards it introduces a big problem with the economy. I think it introduces a big issue with players reaching this tier of content very late compared to some of the no-lifers that have been playing for a very long time, creating a big wealth gap between them. And overall, this is a great change for somebody like me. But for newer players, I think it's going to be a big problem, because it's going to be increasing the price of items, as gold will continue to be devalued the same way that it was on the Korean servers. And I don't understand this decision, because they are not introducing anything in tier 3 that makes the content better than it is in tier 2. Because already in tier 2, we're getting all the fun stuff, you know? We're getting the equalized content, we're getting difficult raids, we're getting, the dungeons as well, right? We can run Guardians, we can do Chaos Dungeon. We're not getting the meat. But what we're also not getting with tier 1 and tier 2 content, unfortunately, is gold generation. So now this creates this problem, where people are going to have to rush to tier 3. They're going to have to rush making outs. They're going to have to do all this stuff to make this gap of wealth as small as possible. Otherwise, they're going to have a very difficult time entering this content later on. The same way if you were to start playing Path of Exile, you'd start for the first time playing on standard and not in a new league. Once you reach the end game, you're going to realize that yes, you're going to have access to all these like shitty items, because people are going to get them in. But the really expensive stuff, as gold continues to get devalued, yeah, that's going to get really tricky. That's going to be a very, I think, big problem in the long term. In the short term, I don't think so. Now, all of this, I think, also stems from this very ambiguous sentence. Additional T3 content will be added to the game post-launch in order to set the pace for player progression, both in terms of new content and optimal difficulty. What does this mean? Who are they making the game for? Are they making it for the no-lifers that are going to get to tier 3 content and find out that the only thing that they can do is run Belganis and that's it? And then eventually, once other players reach their tier of content, they're going to be boosting them, because that's the most efficient way of playing the game, just boosting people for Belganis. I don't know. I don't think that's particularly exciting. And if they do introduce Argos, when are they going to introduce it? Obviously, they should be introducing Argos and Valten soon. But soon for a player that's no-lifing might mean within 3 weeks. For a player that's newer to the game or more casual, doesn't have a lot of time, that might mean 3 months when they get there. And at that point, economically, they're kind of messed up, right? There's already a big problem in my eyes there. Not to mention that, to me, the best aspect of Lost Ark is its difficulty. I perceive it as a Souls game. I don't like this idea of being a player that's either boosting other people because I'm overgeared for the content because I've been doing it for longer than others due to the fact that I play video games for a living, or I'm getting boosted through the content if I'm a newer player. I think both of those suck, both for the newer player and for somebody who's no-lifing it. I don't think that's a good thing at all. And there will be nothing else to do, and you will very quickly trivialize this content if you're just looking to be as efficient as possible with how little time you have. And that doesn't necessarily apply to all types of players, right? MMORPG players don't necessarily always play games like that. I mean, we've seen it in classic WoW that people try and min-max really hard. I know PoE players try to min-max really hard. It all boils down to timing, and I just do not think that there is good timing when it comes to releasing those bigger raids, right? Even something like Argos. Because if they release it too quickly, then again, the newer players are just going to get boosted through it the same way that people can't get parties, so they have to get boosted through Russia, right? Especially if they're newer and they don't understand mechanics. It's very difficult, even with our community, it was very difficult to get a group together that had this organic feel of progression through Argos. This like sit down with a bunch of friends and just try and go through the mechanics, try and figure them out. Don't look at guides, don't look at videos, really play the video game, right? Not for the sake of winning or whatever. It's for the sake of playing the game, for the journey, for the enjoyment of discovering how you do this, and then eventually putting it on farm mode and having a lot of fun. And I think that's going to be hard to get, honestly, because this is just not going to be efficient to do it organically. You're going to find very few people to do it with, potentially, because people just want to be efficient when you can just get bussed through it, right? You can get boosted, somebody else can do it for you. And those guys are always going to be heavily overgeared, because the maximum gear score that you can get, I believe, is 1430, which you will be absolutely able to bust people super easily on something like Bilganis. But even not even that, like I think even 14-15, if you're a good player and you're playing a good class, you're going to be able to do it pretty freaking nicely. Now, it's definitely more than 1370. But either way, I think that already introduces a pretty big issue. Just the busing and even encouraging that sort of behavior through something like this. I just don't think that it's healthy for the game. And yeah, that was kind of like the why do we play the games? For me personally, I know that's not the case for everybody. And I know for some people, they just want to sit down and, you know, grind out some games and just have fun and really chill out, you know, don't really think about it. But when it comes to me, I really want that Monster Hunter Dark Souls experience out of Lost Ark. And I think it's absolutely there. And I think the game totally works for that. And I am personally really looking forward, because I'm going to be rushing through content so much, to the difficulty of tier 1 and tier 2, because it can be pretty challenging at times, especially again if you're doing it with a group that's you know, experienced or not experienced, semi-experienced, however you want to call it, and you're really like not trying to farm up, you're just trying to get through it as fast as possible, which unfortunately will be the most efficient way to do it. It almost feels like you have to get all your alts into tier 3, and then you can start to like enjoy the slower paced aspects of the game. But you know, those people who enjoy the game from the beginning, they'll have a lot of fun, but once they reach endgame, I think they're going to be recognizing some pretty big issues. Especially since, yeah, to me, if there's really no catch-up mechanics, and again, these are all assumptions, right? Same with the Argos. When is it going to get introduced, and for what group of players? The casuals, the end gamers? Like, we really don't know. But for me, I think that's where the fun of Lost Ark will lie. Hardcore endgame paired up with some of the more casual, like, collectible stuff. And it's going to be very difficult to combine those two aspects. I think overall, everybody will have a lot of fun. To summarize, everybody will have a lot of fun when it comes to Lost Ark. I think tier 1 is great. I think tier 2 is fantastic. However, introducing tier 3 only for the gold generation and only for the daily content and the weekly content that's not challenging, you're only ever doing it to reach some cap of gear that you will eventually need for some content that eventually gets introduced, and hopefully they're going to introduce it before you're overgeared for that content, so that you actually get a challenge and it's not just like another piece of something that you farm every week. Yeah, it definitely makes it problematic, and I don't see how they can introduce it in a way that isn't going to hurt some group of players. I think the best way to do it is to hurt the people that are the smallest faction, unfortunately. So people like me, people who will really no life the hell out of it. I think that's the best way to do it and really start releasing it. But even then, man, even that doesn't work because, again, people are just going to get boosted through Argos. They're just going to get boosted. It's going to be the same shit as it is on Russia. Even if you want to fuck over those players and wait a long time, wait until the average player gets to the end game so they can have this like nice progression, those guys are just gonna get boosted. And I guess that boils down to a personal decision, but these sort of choices by developers actively encourage players to play the game without a challenge, and I don't see how that's healthy for Lost Ark in the long term. Even though the short term, fuck yeah, I'm really looking forward to tier 1 and tier 2. And even leveling my alts and not having any boosts or anything like that. I don't know. I guess we're going to have to see. I think they put themselves in a precarious position. I think economically, they already had a lot of issues, even if it would have been like just tier 1 content coming out. Because then people's wealth would have been directly tied not to the amount of gold that they have, but instead to the amount of grudge books that they own, which is like an entirely separate big issue, right? So, yeah, I hope that the devs find a good middle ground for all of this. I hope that it ends up being natural progression for everybody. And I hope that my doomer scenarios aren't going to be as heavy. I guess one more thing that I could mention that was a big point by some people was how tier 1 and tier 2 is literally useless, and how having access to tier 3 is actually so much better because you can actually farm towards the thing that's meaningful, which is actual tier 3 content, actual tier 3 like Legion raids and all this sort of stuff. And as much as I understand that point, I just don't think it works because of the fact that you're creating that giant gap. Keeping people in tier 2, I think, would have been a better solution. And then introducing the real content alongside the daily farmable content that, again, to me, isn't really content. Because I think most people have already been used to the idea of what they're going to be doing is essentially useless, right? Like, obviously you're playing the game, you're having fun. That's all that it is about at the end of the day, right? And you're still going to be making meaningful progression in tier 1 for your account, which is really what matters. It doesn't matter how much you've progressed your character, it matters how much you've progressed overall so that you're prepared for the real content when it comes. So people were already in that mindset. So I think releasing just tier 2 content would have just been more content. And it does have a lot of elements of that difficulty that tier 3 really capitalizes on when it comes to fun. But we wouldn't have this issue of essentially having to rush just another Guardian raid to generate gold for what? For content that will come at some point. I don't know. I feel like I'm repeating myself at this point, but there's just so many different aspects to this, and there's so many different elements, and I really wish that at the start of this, my girlfriend wouldn't start making so much noise so that I could have focused on actually what I'm saying. But I hope that I, at the very least, kind of conveyed my perspective. And while, yeah, I think that everybody's going to have a lot of fun, that fun might not last as long as it should. Yep. I think that's it. I think that kind of summarizes it.